phone, Gabby boy? What? In the bedroom, baby. What's happening, sweetheart?
Hello YouTube, it is me again back for an extra creepy video. So, I wanted to tell some of my weird, funny and creepy nightmares because, you know, it's October, it's Halloween month, let's get spooky. So I thought I would tell you 4 sort of 5 nightmares, and I thought what better way to do it than to paint something that I've actually seen in my nightmares. So throughout the course of this video, you will see me actually painting a scene from my actual real-life bedroom. You are going to see what part of my bedroom looks like. And the figure that is in this drawing is a man who appears in some of my nightmares who likes to wield a stabby knife and likes to use his stabby knife. And that's really all there is to him. If you follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen him before. He is the creepy, crazy man who hides outside my bedroom window and waits for me to fall asleep so he can come in and kill me. That's pretty much all he does. But I thought I would tell you 4 other nightmares of mine that are a little bit more interesting and a little bit more spoopy. But first, I wanted to start with one that's a little funny. It wasn't funny at the time, but it's funny now. And so I thought I would start off with a little bit more of a fun nightmare for you guys. So let's get into that one. So this is a nightmare that I used to have when I was younger. I lived in an apartment complex at the time, and the seal of my window was broken. So when it would be particularly windy in the middle of the night, I could hear this whistling through the seal of my window, and it was always really kind of horrifying for me. And I had this dream that was in oddly vivid color, where it was this very ultramarine blue sky and bright, almost cartoonish stars. I was walking alone down this long, curving street, and I was in a neighborhood of houses that were all identical to each other, and I couldn't find my house. And it's late at night, I'm all by myself, I'm walking down the street, when all of a sudden one of the doors opens to one of the houses, and out steps an old, hunched-over man with a cane. He looks very stern and very upset. He looks at me, and we lock eyes, and immediately I'm terrified. I know there's just something wrong with this man, and so I turn and start walking in the other direction. He makes his way slowly down his driveway and starts to walk after me. For a while, it's just that. I'm walking down a winding street with this strange man following me. He's following rather intently. He wants to catch up to me. And something tells me that he's not just going to invite me inside to use the phone. He has more nefarious plans. Just what? I'm not sure. I start walking and keep walking, and the street just seems to keep going. Copies of the same house cropping up around the corner. One after the other, the same house, the same house, the same house. A street that curves for so long it may as well be going in a circle. I would never know. It just keeps going. Every time I think I've glimpsed a new house, a new bit of hope, someone to save me from the old man, it's just the same house. Not my house, not my family. The old man is walking faster now, hobbling after me. I start to panic and run, and he starts to run after me to catch up. He runs and he runs and he runs, and finally he grabs me. And that's when I woke up. Now, this may seem like a pretty typical nightmare, and what makes this nightmare so funny, you may ask? Well, that's because the old man was not just some creepy old man. No, as a matter of fact, He was wearing fuzzy pink slippers and a fluffy pink bathrobe, and that image is not scary to me in the slightest anymore. I don't know why my brain was so afraid of this man in my dreams, but it's so funny to me now that this old man in this fluffy pink bathrobe with these fluffy pink slippers was chasing me down the street, and I woke up with, like, tears streaming down my face. It's just so funny to me now. So, I hope you found that funny, and from here on out, I'm gonna get into a little bit more of my nitty-gritty, twisted nightmares. So, I hope that if that's something you are into, you stay tuned, because that is what we're about to get into. So, this next dream is one that I like to call Doctors and Demons. So, Doctors and Demons it's not so much one dream as it is a set of dreams that I had when I was 15 to 16 years old. It was this recurring nightmare that I used to have that would take place in my bedroom. In the dream, I was laying in my bed. I always had my sheets and my comforter pulled up. I was safe in my bed. The room was lit this sort of vibrant blue, as though the moon itself was blue. There was always something amiss, this feeling of resting unease over the room. It didn't feel like my safe bedroom anymore. It felt more cold, different, distant. There was always a man in the room. He was tall, wearing a long coat and a hat that covered his face. I could tell he had a face, but I could never make out any of the details. The shadows always covered his face up just enough that he was always out of sight. He was never facing the light enough that I could make out what he looked like. Sometimes it seemed like there was nothing to make out at all. He would stand in various areas of my room. Sometimes he was in the corner, the far corner, with his back to me, just staring into the corner intently. Sometimes he was standing at the foot of my bed, in front of my bedroom door. He would be staring at the door, or at me, or at the wall. Sometimes he would be standing in the middle of the room. Sometimes he'd be crouching in the corner underneath the bay window. Sometimes he'd be staring at my closet door. It was rarely the same place twice. He would always just sort of be hovering. He never said anything. He never really did anything. He didn't move. He just stood. Sometimes I thought I remembered him swaying back and forth slightly, but that was all. He just stood there and watched. What he was watching, I was never sure of. After a while, I would stare back at him and say, "What do you want?" He said nothing. "What do you want?" Still nothing. "Why are you here?" Silence. It would go on like this. I would muster the courage to ask a question, and, as the last question, he would ignore me. Or maybe he just chose not to respond. Maybe he couldn't hear me. I didn't know. He stayed silent, standing in my room, motionless. He did nothing. He made no attempt to hurt me. But there was something uneasy about his presence. As if he was there for something. He wanted something. But I didn't know what. I wanted him to go away more than anything, but I didn't know what to give him, what to tell him. He wanted something from me, but he wouldn't tell me what it was. Sometimes, on the worst nights, he wasn't alone. While there was never anything physically with him, per se, there was a sound from inside my closet. A long, horrible scratching sound. Scratching on the wood, dragging slowly down it. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Long claws digging into the wooden door, slowly, methodically. And then, over the course of the dream, the more frantic my questions became. What do you want? Why are you here? Please, just tell me why you're here. Please, please, I will give you anything, please. The scratches grew more frantic, more intense, faster, faster, more intense, louder. These horrible growls and groans from the closet. A creature I couldn't see but immediately knew if it got out, I was dead. I knew it. Those horrible groans and grunts, guttural sounds of a monster, I knew. The minute that door gave way, I was done. The door kept caving, arching, bowing. I could hear the scratching getting louder. I could hear the chunks of wood falling and cracking, scratching away as the creature dug its way out. Quickly, frantically, it tried to scream its way free. Screams that weren't human. They weren't even demonic. They were just monstrous. Please, please tell me why you're here. Please. And then I'd wake up, sit straight up in my bed, sweating, crying, shaking head to toe. He never told me, and the monster never got out. At least, it only got out once. Once was enough. The day that it got worse, the man was standing in the corner at the foot of my bed, facing my door, with his face tucked into the wall. I couldn't see him. Again, he said nothing. What do you want? I asked. Why are you here? Why won't you leave? He said nothing. The scratches began, slow and careful at first, methodical, almost as though the creature was writing something, trying to tell me something. Morse code of scratches against the door, against the dark inside of the closet. The walls shook, and the creature groaned quietly. But the man said nothing. I tried to ask. He didn't respond. I started to become panicked. Just like always, I started to cry. I gripped my blankets, tugged them to my chest. I didn't get up. I didn't dare. I had no idea what he would do if I stood or tried to run. He was blocking the only exit I had, the only viable exit anyway. What was I going to do? Open the door and burst into where? Nowhere. The monster became more frantic, more panicked, louder, screaming horrible inhuman screams, and then suddenly something different happened. It went dead silent. It had never gone silent before. It had always just gotten louder and louder, worse and worse. The door shook violently as though it were about to come apart. Burst, explode, splinters flying everywhere. That seemed to be the trajectory, but suddenly it just stopped. It went silent. There was nothing. Then, slowly, the man turned his head and looked at me. He had no face, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. And yet suddenly, I just knew. I couldn't tell you how I knew, but I knew he was trying to warn me. He was trying to tell me that something awful was coming. His warning came too late. The closet door slowly creaked open, and from the shadows emerged something I can only describe as evil itself. It pulled its way from the closet and crawled up the wall, digging its claws deep into the pavement. It scratched and clawed its way up the drive wall, stuck itself into the corner. Slowly it turned its head up, up, up until it was looking backwards at me. We locked eyes. It was long, hideous. To describe it as humanoid would be an injustice to any humanoid form. It had a long, twisted spine that you could see through its pale, dewy skin stretched tight across its bones. It had long fingers with horrible, sharp claws that were dug deep into my ceiling and walls. Its face was stretched and distorted, long, almost reptilian, almost as if someone human had tried to turn themselves into a crocodile, skin stretched out over broken, deformed bone, horrible bruising and scarring, yellow and purple. It was disgusting. Jagged, sharp teeth hung on either side of its broken, twisted lips, and it opened its mouth and let out a scream so unholy I thought my ears would break and I would go deaf. That was the last thing I heard before I woke up, screaming, frantic, tearing at my sheets, begging for everything and anything to stop. I just wanted the monster to go away. It was gonna kill me. It was gonna kill me. It was gonna kill me. Slowly, I came back to myself. I told a therapist about the dreams I'd been having. She explained to me that, to her best theory, maybe the man was a doctor, always present in my life. I rarely had any privacy. They asked invasive questions about everything from diet to chemical changes, hormones, menstrual cycles. They poked and prodded at my body, drew blood, drew skin. They took whatever they needed from me, and they never had an answer. She theorized that the thing in the closet was the disease. A monster in the dark that I couldn't see but was always looming, threatening to destroy me. For some reason, I never had the nightmare again. Maybe it was because she rationalized it, or maybe it was just because there was no way the dream could get any worse. Maybe I did have the dream again, but it was just too horrifying for me to remember. Who knows? Okay, so I had to throw in a little acting for that one. I hope you liked it. I like acting, so hopefully I did a good job. So next one is going to be one that I call the hallway. So the hallway is an interesting dream, so let's just jump right into that one. The dream always starts the same way. It's another recurring dream, though less often. It started when I was maybe 14 or 15. I always started in a hotel hallway. I stood directly in the middle. Along both sides of me, on the long walls, there were series of doors. One after the other, impossibly close together, just door after door after door, labeled with embroidered gold numbers. It was beautiful. It had this sickly green wallpaper. I don't know why the wallpaper stands out so much, but every time I remember this dream, I remember the wallpaper. Victorian and a marshy green. On the end of the hallway, on both ends of the hallway, there were doors. that seemed to lead out of the hallway. One was closed and well lit, just sort of like the rest of the normal hotel hallway. A little claustrophobic, but nothing threatening. The one behind me, however, was open. Dark. The lights had blown out in front of it, and I couldn't see anything. I could tell enough that the door was open, but there were no lights on beyond it. It was just dark. Not exactly willing to plunge myself into darkness, I figured, why not try the lit door first? So I start walking. I look at the doors as I pass. 196, 197, 198. They go up. Seems normal enough. Should be all right. I'm looking at the walls. I'm meandering around, seeing a few pretty paintings on the wall here and there, examining the wallpaper. And then I look over to the door that I'm heading towards, and suddenly it occurs to me that I'm not any closer to it than I was a moment ago. That should be impossible. I'm walking forward. How is it I'm no closer to the door than I was a moment ago? I look back, and sure enough, I'm still in the middle of the hallway. But the doors have ascended in number. How is that possible? I shake it off, but try to keep walking. Maybe a little faster, and this time I keep my eye on the door. But every time I think I'm closer, all of a sudden, I realize that I'm not. I'm not getting any closer to the door. I don't know why. It's just out of reach. I stop and pause. I'm stressed and confused. How is this happening? I look around, I look at some of the doors, and nothing seems amiss, except for the fact that I just can't get out of this hallway. Finally, I turn back around and notice that in the darkness behind me, there seems to be a part of the door that's darker. I can't explain it. I just know that against the pitch black there's a silhouette. It's a man, tall, bathed in so much shadow I can't make out any details other than he's big and it's a vaguely male silhouette. Something immediately feels wrong. You know that sick feeling in your gut when you look at someone and you just know. Every piece of you knows. Something is very, very wrong. So I shake it off and start walking again. A little faster this time. Just a little faster. I figure if I move just a little faster, maybe I'll make a little bit more progress. By the time I get to the door, it won't have had time to shoot away from me or whatever it's been doing. I'll be fine. I'll make it there and I can get away from this creepy figure. I'll be okay. I've got this. It's just a hallway. But it doesn't work. The door is always just out of reach. I'm always halfway through the hall. Then I hear it. Footsteps. The man is approaching. I turn and watch as slowly he creeps towards the light. Slow, purposeful steps. Long strides. He moves as though he knows I have nowhere to go. He moves as though he knows he has nothing to lose by moving slowly. He's going to catch me. He knows it. He starts to step towards the light, but the instant I get even a glimpse of light on his features, enough to make out a green shirt, the light explodes. A burst. At first, I'm blinded. It hurts. I cover my eyes and cry out, cringing away. But then the footsteps, a little faster now. He's coming. Every time he gets close enough to a light for me to barely see some of his features, try and make out what he looks like, the light explodes. Bam! Damn. I know I have to get out of this hallway. I know I have to do anything. I know in my core that if I don't make it out of this hallway, I'm done. It's over. I know once he has me, he's never going to let me go. And so this time I don't walk, I run. I run with everything I have in me towards the door. I'm screaming, "Help me! Somebody please help me! Please!" I bang on the doors as I pass. I kick the walls. I throw things, grab paintings off the wall, throw them behind me in the hopes that the ruckus will wake someone, rouse someone. They'll come out of their room, they'll see what's happening, and they'll save me. The lights are going out. It's getting darker. One by one, the lights explode and go away. He's not close enough. He can't get me. And suddenly I slam head-on into the door across the hall. Finally, I've reached it. I grab the door and wrench it open, throw myself inside. Without thinking, I grab the nearest chair and shove it under the handle, stagger back and slam into something cold and hard behind me. I'm gasping for breath. I look at the door. It's closed. It's closed. I should be okay for now. I panic, but I have to calm down. I have to think. I have to look rationally at the situation. I turn. I look for any exit, any escape, a bystander, a witness, somebody who can help me, and freeze. The room has no exits. The only way out is the door I just barricaded. There are no windows, no other doors, no trapdoors, no skylights, no ventilation shafts. Just a door blocked by a chair. But that's not it. The cold, metal, glass thing that I had run into, it wasn't just a piece of the room. It was something terrible. Something beyond comprehension. Something you only imagine in your worst nightmares. It was a tank, tall and glass, stretched to the ceiling, full of some awful yellow liquid. Inside there was a woman, long dead, rotting away, staring at me with glassy, open eyes, with nothing in them. She floats there. She's wearing nothing, covered in awful wounds. She's not alone. There are other tanks just like hers, full of dead things. Dogs, rats. What I must assume at one point were people. I sweep my gaze across the wall and find the center of the room to be a sadist's playground. An Inquisition-style chamber. A table in the shape of a T with straps on it. Shelf after shelf of tool, torture device. Everything is a horror movie. Straight out of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I am in a room of death, and the only way out is towards the killer. The door starts to rattle furiously. The handle starts to shake, slams against the chair, and I hear him growling in frustration. I know I don't have time. I don't have time to do anything. I don't have time to get out. I just have to hide and pray that he blows the door open wide enough that I can throw myself out through it. I would rather charge back out into the dark hall than be in this room with him. I start to look for any hiding place, any at all, and finally I find one and tuck myself into it. I close my eyes and pray he can't see me. He rattles against the door. Thump, 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 and then a crash. The door breaks open. Slowly, his footsteps enter. His breathing is heavy. He's angry. I hear him. Footsteps moving carefully and slowly towards me. He's coming. He's coming closer and closer. He's wearing brown boots, jeans, a green plaid button-up. He has long brown hair. I don't see his face. I don't dare breathe. He walks past me first, looks around the room, and I hope I can make it to the door. I glance towards the door and make a mistake. I breathe. My eyes are still fixed on the door when he looms in front of me, and I make eye contact. The only thing I remember are his eyes, wide and manic. He looks at me like I'm the only thing he needs. He looks at me like a predator who's finally found food. What follows, I won't describe. To describe it would be to describe the worst of someone's nightmares. Suffice to say, I don't think I would have survived. Every time I had this dream, I woke up and cried. The nightmare followed, persisted for years. Sometimes I still have it, and sometimes I still wake up wondering, why? Why the green? Why that shirt? Why? I'm not sure I'll ever know. I'm not sure I want to. Alright, so I know I'm being a little dramatic with these nightmares, but I hope that I'm painting a scene. I'm trying to be a little energetic between telling the stories to kind of remind you guys that I'm okay. I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm creeping myself out talking about some of these, but I wanted to talk about the last one. So the last one is a little bit more lighthearted. It still has some doom and gloom to it. It's still one of my scarier nightmares, but it's a little more nonsensical, so hopefully I think ending with this one might be a little lighter on you guys. So let's get into it. I like to call this one Rising Waters. This is a dream that I had earlier this year. It started with me and my family. The family shifted throughout the dream. Sometimes I was an only child, sometimes I had sisters, sometimes I had a brother. It really just kind of depended on whatever the dream needed at the time. Something was happening. Something apocalyptic was coming. A wave was washing over the world, and we would all be consumed in the flood. Several nations were already dead, and waters were rising. People were doing anything and everything they could to get themselves clear of the wave. People were either going to high-rises or deep underground in airtight places. They had their own ventilation systems. They thought they could keep themselves alive better under the water than above it. My family decided that the best place for us was a high-rise. A tall, tall building that stretched into the sky. It was huge. My family started to look for supplies, and we bunked up with another family who lived in the complex. They had a son, an old man who lived with them, and a mother. The three of them were pretty normal by all standards, except for the old man, who was rather near death and quite creepy. He was just very silent, but the way he looked at you was with a manic intensity that was intimidating. I didn't like him, but it was better than drowning, I guess. My mother and father in the dream weren't very nice people. My father was selfish, I guess is the best word. He was a little mean, but he meant well. He wanted to live, and he wanted us to live, so that was good. One day, he went out for a grocery run to get the supplies that he thought would last us long enough to survive. Plants, potted areas to grow food, and he never returned. We don't know what happened to him. By this point, walking around on the streets was to walk in chest-high waters. It was a dangerous world out there already, but you didn't have a choice. For as long as the water was low enough, before the wave hit, you had to get whatever you could. My father never came back, and after a while we assumed that he was either dead or he'd abandoned us. Either way, he was dead to us. My mother decided to go out next, and if the dream meant for me to have siblings, I guess so did they. My mother was obsessed with looting. She wanted to be beautiful and vain in the end of the world. She thought that now would be the perfect time to get all of those things she always wanted, the things most people weren't bothering with because they weren't essential for survival. She would go out for groceries and food and materials and come back with a sequined silver skirt, a shawl, a wrap, an evening gown, and we would look at her as though she were insane because she was. Those things didn't matter. None of those things would matter when the world ended. It was that argument that we were having when the wave came. We started to rush back to the apartment. We climbed up the stairs when suddenly my mother dropped her shawl. It was expensive. It had diamond and gold. It was unrealistically beautiful. And my mother lunged after it and toppled over, crashing into the waves below. I screamed for her, but I didn't have time to stop. The water was rising too quickly. I clambered up the steps and into the apartment, slamming the door and barricading it with all I had. We made sure the door was sealed tight, and as the water rose outside, we watched as a blue overtook our window. We had been 20 stories high, if not more, and the water was still rising. It rose and rose until eventually even the roof was completely submerged. I saw my mother's body floating out there. She was gone. She floated away and up towards the surface, at least whatever was becoming the surface. It just kept rising to the point that after a while we couldn't tell if the water was rising or if it had stopped. All we could tell was that there was a thin beam of light. It was barely enough to illuminate the one room that we could get into, the one room that was safe and secure. We were all terrified. After a while, the old man died, and we were forced to use his oxygen tanks. We had planned to stay here only as long as we could, only as long as we had to. We had enough food to last us maybe 6 months. By then, we figured rescue would come. The military had to be planning something. Maybe they were in planes that were going to float in the water. Maybe they were in submarines. Maybe they were in boats. Maybe anything. Anything that would keep us safe. But we never anticipated the water going this high. 6 months just wasn't plausible. Most people on the world had to be dead. There was no radio, no internet, no power. There was nothing. Just water. After a while, it became clear that we were going to run out of air. We didn't know when. We didn't really know how we could stop it. The only option we really had was to try and get out of the building. But then that was miles of just swimming up with the hopes that there would be the surface eventually. And then what? There would be no land to crawl to. Did we float? But there were also the ocean creatures to contest with. Things that had once lurked at the bottom of the ocean now had so much more room to flourish. The things that once lurked only in the deepest depths, the most dangerous, horrible creatures of the ocean, now had a playground in the city. Even the apartment wasn't safe. Sharks, piranhas, squids, the horrible, unnamed things that we didn't even know existed were suddenly lurking in the city. If we managed to make it out of the apartment, if we managed to make it to the shore, who's to say that they wouldn't come and find a perfect meal of us? We had no way of knowing. The dream ended with this sort of ambiguous question. Are we going to get out of here? Are we going to be rescued? No one was confident, but there was still hope. There was always hope. Right? Alright, so that is a long video for you guys. That is, oh my gosh, over 40 minutes of video. My goodness. So I'm going to try my best to edit in some sounds to go along with my narration, but I have never done that before, so bear with me if they're not good. So I hope that you enjoyed learning a little bit about my twisted mind. Those are just 4 dreams that I've had over the course of my life. There are so many more. I want to make an entire video someday about what I call the morphine dream. More like morphine dreams, plural. Because there was a series of interlocking, interwoven dreams that I had while I was in the hospital on morphine after surgery. And they are easily some of the most twisted and terrifying dreams I think I've ever had. But I think if I were going to tell that story, it would be best told visually in terms of an animation or an animatic, and that is not something that I'm quite up to yet. So maybe next year for Halloween that will be something that you see. What would you think of that? What would you think of seeing an animation, of the scariest nightmare I have ever experienced? So I hope that you enjoyed. I hope that I didn't creep you out. I'm sorry if you need to turn the lights on. Hopefully my terrifying nightmares aren't too scary for you, and hopefully you feel a little better now that I've just ended with, the potential of suffocating an apartment deep underwater. It says something about me that that's one of my lighter nightmares, doesn't it? Yeah. I need a therapist. I'm sorry. I could probably show this video to a shrink one day and be like, hey, so, this is my twisted brain. What do I do about that? So, hopefully you've enjoyed these stories, and hopefully you've enjoyed this drawing. I really like the way that it's turned out, so I hope that you do as well, and I hope that you are having a spooky Halloween month, and I hope that you enjoy your Halloween. Stay spooky and stay fun, my friends. Have a good morning, evening, afternoon, nighttime, time of day, and I will catch you guys in the next video if you're subscribed, which you should be, because I'm spooky and scary and I deserve subscribers. And I hopefully will catch you guys next week in what should be my Inktober sketchbook tour, but if not, that will be week after next. So you have that to look forward to. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.